Okay, thank you guys. It turned out pretty good. Bob did a great job, despite not letting me in there. Okay, what we're going to do now, I would like to introduce George Tomic. He's going to open it up for questions, but I'm going to actually ask Portwood. Let's see, it was Stan was first here. Stan Evans. Portwood is second. Joyce Henderson, can you walk around the stage? There's some steps on the side there. Can you jump up there? Ayana Najuma? Did Ayana Najuma come? Where is she? Joyce Jackson. Unfortunately, Wayne Thompson is not here with us tonight. He passed away a few years ago, but his family is here, his sister and his niece, and where are they? There you are, back there. Thank you for coming. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to George, and he's going to do for about half hour, 40 minutes or so of Q&A, and then we're also going to open it up to audience members. There's a microphone over there on the side, so if you have a question that you are dying to ask, you can run over there and grab that microphone. Not run, walk over there is fine too. Then after that's over with, I went ahead and closed the silent auction because we're running a little bit late and we'll have to scoot out of here. So those who did the last bid, go check out your number. It is circled. You want to take those to the ticket table and have those people that helped us during the ticket, they'll help you check out. Here's George.
Please be seated. Before we get started, there were a couple of items that when I first saw this, I wasn't quite sure how much time I would have to do this, but there are a couple of things that I wanted to mention. Charlton Heston was in Oklahoma City back in the late 60s, I think 68, with a fellow actor named Leif Erikson. Heston was talking about politics, actors getting involved in politics, and Leif Erikson was talking about violence in entertainment, which is still resplendent today, unfortunately. But the late Charlton Heston remembered being in Oklahoma City before, and it was quite an experience for him. And he's a very, very down-to-earth person, as you can tell, even though he did play Moses. Another point I'd like to mention is the fact that Calvary Baptist Church has been completely remodeled. It's an historical monument now. A consortium, I believe, of attorneys got together and completely restored it. The Oklahoman did a nice story online about it last year, and as I understand it, it's opened up now for services, worship services for anybody in the immediate area, which is great. Yes. What? Yeah, well, there you go. The more, the merrier. And also, let me say, this is one heck of a act to follow. I think that that documentary is a tremendous production, and Clara Looper, her family, and the kids that were so brave to come to downtown Oklahoma City many, many years ago really are to be congratulated and proud of the accomplishments that you've done. I grew up in a segregated suburb, a very nice suburb of Chicago called Oak Park. And Oak Park is integrated now, although it's a work in progress. And it's been fairly successful, and Chicago still remains, unfortunately, one of the most segregated metropolitan areas in the country. But that's the way it goes. Okay, we haven't talked for 7 years, have we? 7+ years. I'd like to know from each of you your thoughts about what you just saw and what you said and how you feel about things. Anybody first? Okay. Got the Army first.
As I was watching the movie, the one thing that struck me was how we had to, can everybody hear me? Was how we had to evade our parents. Our parents were very nervous about us as children being able to do this. And I remember sometimes we would do interesting things, as you heard in the film, to do that. And as we were doing these things, for us, even though they talked about the courage really wasn't there for us. It was kind of an adventure, but at the same time, it was the right thing to do. But I just remember how I can get around my parents who were very, very nervous about this so we can get out and do it.
I didn't have that problem.
Well, I'd say that's like mother, like daughter.
I think one of the most amusing things about what happened was we sit in for all that time at Cats, waiting for them to. And by the way, there was a sign sitting right next to me that was advertising, had a picture of a banana split there. And you'll get a kick out of this because the cost of the banana split, and it was at that time it was a banana and 3 scoops of ice cream and with the whipped cream and the cherry on top and all that, and it was all of 35 cents.
I didn't know I could sing. We represent really so many. In this room right now, there are those who participated in the civil rights, the sit-in movement here in Oklahoma City. Would you please stand? Just stand wherever you are. Wherever you are, stand. Wherever you are, stand. Yes. Yes. We didn't know what fear was back then. But as I stated, you knew something is wrong with this picture if you are excluded because of the color of your skin. And I had Clara Lupa as my classroom teacher. Many of us did. And to be truthful, I didn't think I had an option not to participate. I tell people I had more fear of Clara Lupa than I did. But as I look back, how thankful I am to have been a part. And as I tell people, know your history. Understand we have not had the opportunity to gather in a room like this together. Know your history so you can appreciate where we are now, but understanding we still have a long way to go. Thank you.
I fall in 2 categories, somewhat like Marilyn. My mother and Aunt Clara, as I called her all my life, were best friends. So it seemed like there was no option. I never felt like that I wasn't prepared to go to the sit-ins. I was next to the youngest. I was 7. And my sister was 5. But I didn't realize until recently, I think probably until I sat with Joyce last year, what a major contribution to history this really was. Mm-hmm. And when I chatted with her last year in an interview, I started thinking about all the people that I had met over the years, whether they were from Oklahoma City and all the NAACP conventions we had attended, that everyone that I could think of was a contributing member of society. I couldn't think of one person that I'd ever met that this had not been a character builder for us. And for me personally, when I look back on my own life and think about the support that I had from my parents, from Aunt Clara, from the NAACP Youth Council, the leadership ability that we obtained, the team building opportunities we had, the ability to speak to in large groups of people, the ability to write. I mean, it really was a boot camp for life. And if you speak to anybody in the room that was a part of this process, it really was a life-changing experience. We all have been able to make contributions, and hopefully those of you who are sitting here with children will think to yourselves, how can I add value to my own child's life? And what can I do as a child if you are 7 years old? And I've talked to some earlier today that are 7 and 8 years old. So I asked that question, what do I do now? It's really been a life-changing experience, and I'm so glad that Julia decided to take this on.
Little do you know when you're a part of history. Of course, we had no idea. And like everyone else, we were too afraid to tell Miss Looper no. And it was an adventure. It was an adventure for all of us. I remember my mother being very upset, calling Miss Looper and telling her, do not get my daughter locked up. And of course, I was locked up several times, which was just all a part of the adventure. And then when you look back and you realize you actually made a difference in so many lives. So it is, and I do, like everyone else, thank Julia for bringing the story together of our history. So thank you, Julia.
Tom, since I just said one word,
Yes,
can I
yes,
say something
ma'am.
else? I just said one word the last time. As I looked at the movie tonight, I could not help but wipe away the tears in my eyes. Because I remember my mother used to have us to say over and over again, someday somebody's gonna talk about me. Someday somebody's gonna write about it. I guess it's gonna be me, myself. And I kept hearing her voice when I was sitting there. And I thought about my grandmother. My grandmother who moved to the servant quarters of Nichols Hills to educate my mother. And I thought about my grandfather, who died without even having an opportunity to spend a night in a hotel or a motel anywhere. And I thought of the sacrifices so many people made in this city to make Oklahoma City's demonstration the foremost successful demonstration in America. And I said, how did we do it? We did it because people in Oklahoma cared. The police department, some of the ministers, because you know, we went to some of the white churches on a Sunday morning and they kicked us out. Most segregated time in Oklahoma was Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. But we kept moving. We kept moving because we didn't know how to give up. They sent us to a school where they told us to put on some tough skin if you want to survive. And that's what we had to do. So on behalf of my family, on behalf of my mother who taught so many kids, I can't even give a number to her. A mother who now sleeps in yonder's grave, but who gave her life so that we could live in a better society. We all played our part in history, and history will reflect. Clara Luper only represented part of you, because without the love and devotion and determination that this great state of Oklahoma had, we could have been another Selma. And when I saw that Selma on that bridge, and my mother was standing on that bridge, and they were getting ready to honor her 2 weeks before she died, and I could not help but say, thank you, God, for putting us in this state that cared. We haven't gone as far as we're gonna go. We made a lot of advancements. We have a long way to go, but we're on our way.
Marilyn, you must be a mind reader. In the business, we call it a segue. Let's fast forward now and talk about things today. Let's talk about things, as you mentioned, this has been a model city and pretty much a model state in the sort of South. But there are some problems elsewhere around the country. There's a tremendous amount of partisanship. In my hometown of Oak Park, I spent some time today looking on YouTube, and they had a meeting of the Housing Authority, which is kind of the way that they started doing integration in Oak Park. And the chairman, a white person, was looking out there, and she said, the next time we have a meeting, I want to see somebody under 40 years old here, or 50 years old here. And it's the problem. It is a problem. Dr. King was 27 when he started out, and life cut tragically short. Is this documentary something that can be taken and launched and really do some good educationally, et cetera? Kind of a linchpin to go forward. Anybody? You got the mic.
I got the mic. The first thought that crossed my mind is, I'm 68 years old now. I'm 68. The thing I think about is sometimes when I would talk with my kids about things like this, they would look at me and they would say, Dad, we don't believe this. We don't believe that happened. You know, it's kind of interesting. In the film, the lady mentioned that she was from a town south of Oklahoma City. And a town south of Oklahoma City is Moore, Oklahoma. A town south of Oklahoma City is Norman, Oklahoma. When I was a kid, those were known as sundown towns, which basically meant that there were no African Americans living in those towns. The first African American that ever lived in Norman, Oklahoma, that had a home there, this happened in 1967, George Henderson. So up until that time, not an African American lived in that town, nor more. The point I'm making here is that this film that Julia has put together, that she thought of, and her family came up, is a way that we can talk to people coming up about this is the way things were. We don't need to be there anymore. We need to move forward from that.
I agree. Unless we can understand from where we've come, unless you can walk on my side of the street, then you can't understand me. So history is important. And it's important for not just black people, not just white people, but for all people. We must understand all of our histories in order to go forward in this society. Yes, the film is great, and it's going to be better because we're going to continue to write the story.
I've got a question just to add on that. You may want to answer this, but one of the things that you all were talking about was the boot camp and learning the civics, learning political science. I mean, you had it rammed into you, didn't you? And it made a difference because it emboldened you to be able to get out and meet the adult pressure and the harassment that you got. Are we getting enough in our education system today about what's going on? And the reason why I bring this up, Fusion, which is a research service, did an astounding survey of millennials last week, the 23 to 34-year-olds in this country. Not 81 or 82% of them, more than 4 out of every 5, could not name one U.S. senator in their state. You know, Jay Leno used to do man on the streets and kids on the streets, as a joke. Well, I don't think that's a joke.
It's not a joke at all. I think one of the important things that we have to remember, people talk about the original 13 that set in, and something that I always thought about was the fact that out of all those 13 kids, every one of them went on to have at least 1 degree. Everyone, and most of them graduate degrees. And the effect that responsibility had on us was such that it made us know that we could succeed. And this is the story to be told. This is something where this movie can be shown, because some people were as young as 6 and 7 and so forth, but all of them have gone on to do well. And I used to have a reporter that would call over the years. Every time this year, they'll call and say, well, you were in the original 13 and blah, and this. And I had the same guy that called for several years. And so he said, well, I call you every year, don't you? Aren't you getting the big head? Aren't you? You're a celebrity and all of that. I think he was sort of, kidding me. He was saying that you're sort of narcissistic now, aren't you? I said, no, but I think a lot about myself. I said, you don't understand what narcissism is. A narcissistic person does not love himself. He is in love with himself. And when you're in love with yourself, there's no room for anything else, including God. And the thing that we got out of it was the fact that we have sort of a different and an elevated self-image. And we found that no one can perform, no one can act in a way that's inconsistent with his own self-image. And learning things like this early is what I think got all of us to where we are today, which is not only, you might say, rather educated, but happy. Mm-hmm.
I reflect on Clara Loop in the classroom, because when she taught history, she brought history to life in the classroom. And as a result of that, we became a part of history. Now, we didn't go around participating thinking, oh, we're making history, oh, we're making history. That was not what we were about. But she believed in bringing history to the classroom. So as we reflect on where we started from and where we are now, it's easy for you to think, oh, we've accomplished it all, but we know better. The fact that we have our first black president of the United States, and all of the hatred started coming out, it tells you we still have a long way to go. So as we look at that, we have to share our story, the history, with our young people. They assume that we have had these opportunities all along. But when they find out and when they say, well, I didn't know anything about the sit-in movement, tell me about it. We've got to tell the story. We cannot ignore this as part of history. But we build on it because, as I said in the film, we don't want to go back. We want to continue to go forward. Well, having the first president and thinking about Clara Luper, when he had his inauguration, my thought was, I got to go to the inauguration. This is the first. Well, the second time he was elected, I'm thinking, well, I don't need to go to the second one because I went to the first one. I thought, oh, I better go to the second one. This may be the last one, So at any rate, I'm thinking still in my mind, Clara Luper. So attended both inaugurations, but more so had the opportunity because she provided opportunities for us in making history. Attending the march on Washington, August 28, 1963. All of that tied into what was going on here in Oklahoma City. So, went to that march. 50 years later, I got to go. I got to go and help celebrate the 50th year because Clara Luper planted a seed in all of us. Although we were part of history, you cannot assume that the privileges and opportunities that we have, we will continue to have. Because if you look at what's going on now, little by little, some of our rights are slipping away. And we're going to look up and say, what happened? I don't want Clara Luper to come back and say, what happened?
It's funny, Joyce, you say what happened. I remember during those times, and I was 7 and, sat in all the way to 64, and And I remember kids and hearing parents say, look what we did. After all those sit-ins, week after week, hour after hour, and you're right, we went to the March on Washington, we were at all the major marches, we were at every rally. And I think for those who sat on the sidelines and maybe didn't have the courage, and I think it was courage, and didn't have the guts, to be a Clara Looper, to be a Portwood Williams Sr., or a Mary Shaw Pogue, or Miss Jackson. You know, there were those that said, look what we did. We look back, at least I do, I look back now and say, for those of you who didn't have an opportunity then, you have an opportunity now. Because you have children and grandchildren that have an opportunity to make a difference. I think what was, to me, one of the most touching experiences, and I used to hear Aunt Clara talk about it all the time, about how we spoke, how we wrote, how we carried ourselves, the type of character we had, and then constantly hearing her say, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're all entitled to it. And sometimes people take that for granted, that now that we can all sit in this room together, black and white, gay and straight, rich and poor, and feel like we still are entitled when you pick up the paper every day and you read about a Ferguson or a situation in New York or something happening right there on the south side of Oklahoma City, and you kind of get really comfortable in your own skin. When we were children, the whole conversation that Marilyn speaks about her grandmother, you know, going to Nichols Hills and staying in the servants' quarters, when now you can have a home in Nichols Hills if you want to. It's very easy to get in that comfort zone and forget about all the work that still needs to be done. I mean, I give a lot of credit, and all the credit, as I said earlier, into being able to do things that no 7-year-old child I know did what I did. I mean, from going to the sit-ins to Aunt Clara and I, me taking my first airline trip with Aunt Clara, we flew from Oklahoma City to Little Rock to a meeting to see Mrs. Daisy Bates. Kids weren't flying. They weren't staying in hotels. They weren't eating in restaurants in New York City. Every summer, us going to an NAACP convention and meeting kids from all over this country. Chicago, Atlanta, LA, New York, Detroit, everywhere we went. Most kids in society today can say, oh, I went down to Dallas, you know, I went to Atlanta, and even may be taking a senior trip to the Caribbean. But it wasn't for this kind of work. It was for a vacation. So all the work that I feel like we've done, I reflect on it, and as Julia and I spoke to some children in Norman earlier this week, that I do have a voice. We need to let them know that, because we were taught that we had a voice. And so I ask you, I cannot reiterate this enough, that you need to go home and look at those grandchildren and talk to your children and remind them, as Joyce said, FREEDOM, freedom, it has a new meaning in 2015.
All I can say is Miss Looper planted a seed. And because of Miss Looper, I think I became a history buff as part of my education. But I am concerned today. I'm concerned that we're losing the momentum that we made, that we're losing our history, that the kids, the young people today have no idea of the things that we encountered, that we dealt with. And the schools, I don't know what they're doing as far as educating. I think we need to educate our children. I think we need to step up to the plate because of our new black president. Seems like racism came forward with a rush. And so I think something needs to be done now. I'm just afraid that I'm at the stage now where I'm not out there marching and doing the things that Miss Looper taught me, but something needs to be done, and we all need to be a part of it. And we need to pay attention to what's going on in our world today. Thank you.
Well, that's very true. That's very true. And as a journalist, for several decades anyway, Ayanna, you're absolutely correct. I wanted to get into this a little bit without getting into it too much, and that's the fact that that we don't only have newspapers anymore and radio and TV with 3 or 4 channels. We have 24/7 news cycles. Anything happens, you're going to find out about it within a minute or two, unless it's in some remote area around the world. A lot of people are getting, good information off the internet, but there are a lot of right and left-wing blogs on the internet that look like newspapers and legitimate sources, but they're really talking points for somebody's own personal view. And this is an area that I think everybody needs to be more cognizant of in the future, because, as you say, it's a different world. And my feeling was, when I got ready for this thing, that this is actually a time where we're going forward 2 steps, back 1 step, maybe 2 steps forward and a half back, kind of like the Oklahoma City Thunder at times this year, but that's another story. I'd like to have somebody talk about this just a little bit, just to see if there's anything. Ayanna, you mentioned that you made some contacts up in Omaha, and to get this out, and networking, I think, is very, very important when you're dealing with a totally different news cycle around the world.
When Julia called me, and actually interviewed me back in '08, we had in-depth conversation about the direction of the film. And I think when she started to ask the question to Dad, who I call Dad, Bill Clifford now, about his experience and what life needed to be like, or what he had experienced, I think it started to ask, a lot of questions started to pop up in her brain. And as time passed, she came to me and she said, you know what, you were one of the youngest. You traveled the road with all the rest of them, with Joyce and Marilyn and Calvin and Portwood and Miss Jackson, as I call her. And she said, I'd like you to join me on this journey of educating young people. So I said, well, Julia, what do you want me to do? She said, we need to develop a campaign of voice. This film has got to be the next step. We had part 1 with Clara Looper, the NAACP Youth Council. As we think about history and the age of all you 12, you're hitting on 70's door. And that's true. A couple of years from, we'll be getting Social Security. Some of us are getting Social Security. So what happens to the next generation? So she said, I'd like you to join me in this campaign called the Civil Project. And I said, Julia, what does that look like? And in the last, Julia and I talk often. I mean, she's like my sister now. And I said, what should that be? And she said, well, you're the PR person, you're the communications person. I said, we need to have a campaign that says, I have a voice. Young people need to understand that they have a voice. So this last couple of days, Julia and I traveled down to Norman, and over the last 6-8 months, she was saying that people are going to be interested in this, and I said, absolutely. They're going to want to know, one, what was the history, but then secondly, as any amazing architect would be, what is the blueprint that we need to lay for the next step?
Good.
And that's what it's like.
All right.
So now we're scheduled to go to Nebraska and out to Washington State and up to New York and down to Florida. And Julia's getting calls every day saying, can you come to my town? Can you come to my town? We went up to Boston and met with social studies teachers that were like blown away that this story was even being told because they'd never heard it before. And they, picked at our brains. Julia and I were like on 24/7. Julia, somebody called me. Julia say, somebody called me. They pulled me aside. They asked me this question. They asked me that question. They wanted to know about her journey as a filmmaker and what made her decide to do this. But then they wanted to know what was my story as a 7-year-old child. And when you put communications, PR, marketing, and film together, it becomes an amazing story in terms of telling children what the message could be if they were willing and had the guts and the courage to create the message. So that is what's happening in terms of us moving this message forward. One of the things Julia and I did just the other day is we challenged some young people down in Norman. You know, civil rights, as Marilyn had mentioned earlier, and as Aunt Clara said, it's not just about public accommodations, it's about housing and health care and jobs. It's about keeping people out of prison. It's about being the best you can be. And so we challenged the kids in Norman the other day, and I said to them, I'm giving you an assignment. And they looked at me like, giving you an assignment? These were 3 groups of kids, 120 kids per group. And I said, I'd like you to write a 750-word essay on an issue that's important to you, and I would like you to write about the solution that you would propose to address that particular issue. And then I asked them, those of you who are going to accept my challenge, my assignment, stand. Because see, that's what we were taught. Put your action where your mouth is. And of the 120 kids, about, 30 or 40 kids stood up. They said they would accept the challenge. What I also did was I gave them my phone number and my email address.
Great.
And as a result of that, I'm going to wind this down, but as a result of that, before Julia and I could get to the car, let me just tell you, some of these kids are embracing the idea of change and making a difference and taking some action. Before we could even get to the car, I had received about 20 texts in my phone. I'm writing the essay. Thanks for coming. We can't wait to get started. Thanks for taking the time to bring this to our attention. So that's the journey we're on. And we're asking everybody to join it with us.
That's the way it should be done. That's the way it's got to be done. We've opened up the, how about some questions from the audience here? Julia set up a microphone over there. Don't be bashful.
I'd like Dad to come over, if he wouldn't mind, up to the front. Dad? Dad always has a few good words to say, and I also want to let you guys know we only have about 5 minutes left, so we only have a few minutes for Dad, and then we're going to go ahead and have open 1 or 2 questions from the audience.
I'm speaking now as a dad. Julia?
You tricked me.
I told her I wanted to say a couple of words, and those are the couple of words.
He promised me a couple, so. Surprise me. Okay, George.
I'm glad. I knew those weren't for me. Anybody? Do we have a questioner? There we are.
It seems to me, can you hear me? It seems to me that I'm talking. Can you hear me?
There you go. There you go.
It seems to me that the tool that you all are all looking for, we've already seen tonight. And the way to use this tool, I feel, would be to have it as a required film for every public and private school student in Oklahoma, at least, to see, say, all the 5th graders or whatever grade is selected, and then every year do the same thing with the next grade. And if you do that for 10 or 20 years, the message is going to be distributed. Thank you. Thank you so much for what you all have done.
Bill Clifford just reminded me that the documentary meets all the criteria currently, as he understands it, to be included in curriculums, public schools in Oklahoma right now. So that's good. Mike?
First of all, I'd like to thank Julia, all the panel, for what you gave Oklahoma, especially to the people sitting up on the stage. We can talk about history, but I hope people really understand. Those people sitting up on the stage right there helped change history, not only in this state, but across this country. And we owe them a great deal of gratitude for that. But reading everything that was on here, if you all read this, there was a special thing on here, on this one here, and it says, show this film to your students on Friday, March 6, 2015, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Selma and the Voting Rights Act. What 9 white men in robes could give us, 4 white men and a black man in a robe can take away from us. And what I'm talking about, of course, is when they knocked down section of the Voting Rights Act. While Oklahoma is not the worst, we also implemented in this state restrictions on voting right by having voter IDs and stuff. And if you're talking about the project for the students to get involved in, it's to make sure our 2 senators and our 5 representatives are the ones that bring it up in Congress to revise that and put that back into the Voting Rights Act. So I was just wondering what you all thought about the situation that exists now that's going on in this country dealing with the Voting Rights Act.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brandon. I don't necessarily have questions. I just have thank yous. Thank every single one of you. I really admire and honor the video. Like, I've never really, you hear about it, but you can't really see. When you see something, it's a difference. And that video should be everywhere if it's not already. So, but thank you. I gotta shake every single one of your hands. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
My name is Bernard, and I just have a brief comment. I graduated from Dungy High School in 1964, and both George Henderson and Wayne Thompson were classmates of mine. Miss Looper, along with Miss L.A. Joseph, were our homeroom teachers. And anybody who knew Miss Looper, when you see Marilyn, when you hear Marilyn, you see Miss Looper, and you hear Miss Looper. Thank you. And George, I just want to say, I don't know if I've ever told you this, thank you. We really appreciate everything that you've done for us, for the state of Oklahoma. Thank you.
We've got time for 2 more questions. 2 more questions, I'm afraid. We've got to.
All right, I have a comment. My name is Dorcine, and I want to tell the group there and the other unknown people that marched, thank you so much for your adventurous spirit. I have a correction for Colonel Evans. I recognize his brilliance and the service that he's done to this country. But George Henderson was not the first African American to live in Norman. The history behind the Sundowner towns is that when African Americans came to Oklahoma, they came by the hundreds of thousands, and they settled in almost every part of the eastern and midwestern part of Oklahoma. And they lived in towns like Norman, Sapulpa, Bartlesville, Durant, and many other towns. And one day, all the African Americans were told that they had to leave those towns. They had 24 hours to collect all their belongings and leave. And they became sundowner towns in about, I think it was 1899. So African Americans had lived in those towns, owned homes, owned land. So the speech that Ella Baker gave about more than a hamburger, it's about social injustice also. And I teach about the economic loss that segregation and discrimination caused African Americans, because when they had to leave their farms and their homes, they left economic wealth. They left land that had oil on it. And so the reason that the African American population is 25% impoverished is because of acts like that.
Thank you. Let's have very.
The first thing I just want to say, you're absolutely correct, and you're right by correcting me. We did have African Americans all over Oklahoma in different places. My family, for example, came up here in 1889 in the run, and they were both in Cleveland County and in Oklahoma County. You were right, they were pushed out. What I was talking about was during the time where we came along, those were sundown towns for the reason you just mentioned. We were pushed out and we were not allowed to come back until the 60s. But thank you for the correction.
We very short statement or question. We have to clean up after this, or we'll be locked in here.
What would you say? What would you say to the kids of today? How can we make a difference?
Oh, one small thing you could do is spend less time on social media and more time.
Oh boy.
And more time on serious and civil media.
I'll tell you, old timers have taken over Facebook. There aren't any kids on that anymore. Yep.
There's something else you can do. There's something else you can do. You can be the best you can be. You can absolutely be the best you can be. When I happen to work at a university, and I see things all the time where there are doors open, and we don't take advantage of the fact that there are doors open because we aren't the best we can be. Every single day, we need to work to be the best we can be. And that's the message that I would give to you. Try to always look at the fact that there are opportunities there, and I'm going to push forward and be the best I can be. That's how we change the world.
Thank you very much, Colonel. One last question.
Mine isn't really a question. It's more of a thank you, because I'm a 16-year-old high school student, and I've taken Oklahoma history, and I've taken United States history. And we are not taught people's stories. We are taught the facts. And as a youth, I see so many people at my school, no matter what color they are oblivious to the fact that there are still issues. And I want to thank you so much for giving me the chance to have all of this brought to my attention. And just, I'm speechless. It's amazing. Thank you all so much.
All right, thank you very much. On that note, let's turn it back to our hostess.
Before she comes up right quick, I want to tell Stan's talking about being 68, and I just want to tell him that you're just a kid.
I just want to say thank you to these guys for coming. Thank you, George Tomic, for your great job. Thank you guys all for coming tonight. You notice there's fundraising. This is a fundraising event. The reason why is we're still paying for photos. Photos are anywhere from $125 to, there was one that was $1,000. But I went and got it. It's like, oh, such a good photo. But most of them were $500 or less. But so we have about a $25,000 bill that we're still paying down. And when I did the math, and once I finally got signed on all the licensing, it ended up being $33,000. One thing that was great was that Oklahoma Publishing Company donated all the photos from Oklahoma. Thank you. We have some wonderful sponsors. Mike and Joan Kornblatt are some sponsors. Vahid, if he's still here, I don't know, he may have to slip out. Vahid with Freestyle Marketing and Film is a sponsor, and there's a long list. So if you do have a chance, you've got an auction item, that all that money goes to photos for the bill. And if you want to donate, that's where the money's going to go to as well. If we by chance get more than what we need for the photos, then the money goes to school visits, so we can go to underfunded schools and do school visits. So thank you for coming. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Just for your information, we're having an open house at the Clifford residence, and there are maps up here if you'd like to come. Real informal type visits.
Who are you all filming this with?
No, she's right there.
This is a map.
Yeah, this is the map of the warehouse. If you'd like to go out, visit. We got a lot of folks out there.
This is wonderful. Good. Appreciate what you were involved in. So you filmed the panel discussion?
Good meeting you.